We're recording.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for attending today. My name is Paul Benbow. I'm a business development manager here in North Carolina in the U.S. So, I think before we get started, I'd like to do one little housekeeping item. And on your GoToMeeting panel, they got this little arrow here. If you click that, it'll minimize the panel so it slides out of the way. And then toward the end of the presentation, or during the presentation if you like, you can ask questions here. And organizers only means we see it. And then at the end of the presentation, you can enter questions anytime. We'll actually get to some of these questions that you have on your, and then you can just enter them there, and then we'll get to them at the very end. So there's the panel, and that's a little housekeeping note. And we are recording this session too, so we will send this out, their link, and then you can send it to your friends or associates or watch it again, what have you. So without further ado, with me on the presentation today is Tom Hassey. Tom is also a business development manager, and he's out of Detroit, Michigan. Say hello, Tom.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
You'll hear Tom's radio voice here in a minute. And then we have Paul Hollingsdale, our technical services specialist. Introduce yourself, Mr. Paul.
Hello, everyone on the call.
Great. So Paul will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. There's two Pauls. Paul Hollingsdale will be doing a lot of heavy lifting because he'll be doing the demonstration. So that being said, let me roll into our agenda. So I have just a few slides introducing Chemwatch and kind of talking about who we are. And then Tom will kind of cover some of the value proposition and some of the modules, how our product line is shrink wrapped or developed or product packaged. Then we'll hand the presentation over to Paul Hollingsdale, and then he'll cover, the searching, managing SDS functions, our report generating, how we manage inventory, and then how we can do some of the SARA reporting, things like that, touch on approvals, touch on risk assessments, tagging of chemicals in Query Builder, a lot of excitement about this subject, so when Paul shows you that, it's like, wow. And then lastly, a lot of interest these days in labels, and we can do labels in 47 languages, secondary labeling. I have custom mixtures, labeling seems to be the topic. And then we'll finish with a Q&A session. So like I said, I've got a very brief presentation. Tom is not too much longer than mine. And Mr. Paul Hollingsdale will do most of the heavy lifting, and he'll actually be showing our package. And everybody likes to see our solution because they like to see it live and, how would it work, as opposed to just, a lot of PowerPoints. So all that being said, who is Chemwatch? We've been in business over 25 years, chemical management solutions. We are headquartered in Australia. We have 17 offices worldwide, 3 in the U.S. We're very familiar with Pacific Rim, China, Japan, doing business in the UK. So if you're doing any business internationally, we're very familiar with international. It's, kind of where we cut our teeth. We have over 5,000 chemical manufacturers in our client base. 6 of the top 20 Fortune 500 companies use our products, so we're very well known, both large and small companies. And we're very diversified in the markets that we serve: oil, gas, automotive, mining, aerospace, governments, education, hospitals, so very broad customer base. Some of the companies that trust us with their, with their business, their SDSs, their chemicals, you see every day. So a lot of large companies and a lot of small companies. Sometimes I think cloud-based solutions actually are a great fit for smaller companies because we can easily scale. So you can get the benefit of a very powerful solution, and maybe you only have 1,000 SDSs or 500 SDSs. So that's the beautiful thing about cloud-based software, is the ability to scale, and you don't have to pay a huge amount of money because you're only using a small piece of what our capability is. And for that reason, I think we're very popular with actually some of the smaller companies. So maybe we should work on this slide and put some smaller companies in there. So kind of, what is our value proposition, or, why do people like us? What separates us from the rest of the other vendors? And really, it's our data. We've spent a lot of time capturing and keeping and building databases. We have 23 million vendor SDSs with 32 active data points. So if you need to do a secondary label, we've already got that data extracted. Or if you need to figure out, do I have this in my inventory? Is this a chemical of concern? Chances are we can show you that based off your vendor database. And I think even more impressively, we have reauthored over 300,000 Chemwatch, what we call a gold SDS. And those have over 450 active data points. And a lot of our customers love our gold SDSs because perhaps you buy chemical from multiple people and you're getting conflicting SDSs. Our gold SDS can become the document of record. And there's so many things about our gold SDSs. I don't want to steal any of Paul Hollingsdale's thunder, but as he goes through his presentation, you'll actually see the huge value in the data that we have. In addition to that, we have a regulatory database that is fabulous. So since we keep our own regulatory data, we have literally 20 people on staff that do nothing but keep track of regulatory databases, and we leverage that data in concert with our chemical management package to help you better manage your chemicals for compliance or just whatever information you might require. 4,400 regulatory databases, 100 countries, 5,000 lists. You can read the slide. Very powerful database, great piece of our solution because the two complement each other so well, and nobody has what we have as a combination of those two. And then our classification database, we have over 250,000 substances. As a company, we started off actually authoring safety data sheets 25 years ago. So our authoring solution, which we're not going to spend a lot of time on today, is world-class, and we can author in almost 100 countries, 47 languages. So we're very strong in authoring. So our solution kind of goes from both the managing the SDSs all the way through creating SDSs, and then we have the regulatory database behind it. So really it's our data that's our value proposition. We have excellent data and the IT infrastructure to deliver it. So my last slide is just kind of, our people is also what makes us different. We have over 150 employees, but the employees we have are just not a bunch of IT people running around keeping the the website up. We actually employ chemists and toxicologists and hygienists, and I mentioned the 20 regulatory experts, OHS specialists, physicians. So because we have this group of people that really understand why, that allows us to have our excellent data, and then we understand what you're trying to do, so we can solve your problems and make sure that your people are more productive and your people are doing tasks that, if there's something you can automate with our solution and free up your people's time, that's the goal. So then you can have your people doing more pressing needs and let us do the mundane kind of keeping track of things or alerting you when something needs to be looked at. And so that's really the Chemwatch value proposition is, how can we let your people do more while taking away some of the tasks that really, can be better served by our website with our data. So that being said, Tom, I will let you take it away here and I'll flip the slides for you.
Thanks, Paul. Everyone, as Paul just described, what we have here is a active database of 23 million vendor documents with approximately 32 data points per document. And we provide that to our customers, over 5,000 of them, in the form of a relational database. And our chemists, therefore, update and maintain those data points. And then we put tools and services on top of that relational database, and we make it easy for folks like you to get at that data. One of the ways is it's cloud-based. This is a SaaS application. Minimal IT is required. You need a browser and an internet connection, and away you go. Our configuration, our software platform is based on .NET technology, Microsoft.NET. Very stable, been in business over 30 years, especially in the industrial space. And then we provide the data to users such as yourselves as applications, and they're actually plug-and-play modules that sit on top of that .NET platform. Paul? And the modules are the far left column, what you see. So the materials module basically allows users such as yourself to access the SDS data. The manifest is the chemical inventory module. We have a risk assessment, label manufacturer, a number of ecotox and toxicological report capabilities, and authoring capability. As Paul mentioned, the regulatory library database. we have smart apps or mobile apps that sit on top of these applications, an approvals process, and a workflow management tool. And then we combine them in the .NET space to create our product family. So wherever you see a green check, is underneath that name is the capability of that product. And then the second to the right, what's called bespoke, is a build your own. You can build any configuration you like of those modules. And let's say we have many customers that upgrade. Let's say from SDS management, maybe they want to add inventory management, an approvals module. The URL stays the same. Once it's accepted, like a better term, the capability is plugged into this their application, and away they go. So no updates are required on your end. We do all that ourselves via the cloud. And again, this is the product family that you saw on the previous page, and you see we try to configure our products for our user capabilities. In other words, focusing on the OHS, EHS markets with gold and chemeritis in the middle there. A backpack for folks who just want to manage SDSs. An ability to do authoring on the bottom. We have a standalone label maker called DGen. We have a lot of customers that just access Galleria, the second from the bottom, our regulatory database library. We also provide a number of services that are actually free of charge. They're part of the license subscription. One of them is when clients subscribe, we take their library of chemicals and match it against our 23 million vendor SDS database. If it's not there, we go get it. We call the vendor, we do internet searching, we document all responses, we let our customers know during this process if something is obsolete or if the vendor is not available, so they can make a decision as to what to do to move forward. We record all responses on the document you see there during what we call the acquisition phase, and the report or documentation is available to our customers, again free of charge, and also based upon the frequency of choice, monthly, biannually, quarterly. Once we acquire that data, we extract all vendor SDS data, and we crawl the web continually for any updates, and we put each piece of new data through a rigorous quality assurance process with our own chemists. We extract each version, put it in the library. We never get rid of an old SDS, so as new data comes in, we make it available to our customers, and we provide reporting, what we call a compare report, and you see that on the page here. And this shows in red what has changed from the new vendor SDS to the previous release. And our customers always have access to all SDSs. Again, we throw out nothing. So we just make the latest document available to our customers, but they always have the opportunity to access previous documents. And also, this is a free of charge. Also, as part of our service is we review SDSs before our customers purchase the chemical. We check it against local and international regulations. We let our customers know if there's any cause of concern, and also suggest alternatives where we feel there are health, safety, and emergency issues related. We provide an audit trail of the request and our response, and a written report of every chemical review. And we review these with our own people, our own chemists, our own regulatory specialists. And we do this service to assist if in case there is any legal obligation, but the premise behind this is to ensure that you are using, or our customers are using, safe and suitable chemicals for their workplace. I mentioned the data is available as a subscription, as a URL where you sign into the user interface and manage the chemicals as folders, but we also provide the data through a web service API. That is, we can connect directly to a customer's ERP system, And what they would then specify is the amount of chemicals and the number of data points per chemical that they want to extract. And we do this, for instance, with label manufacturers who want to just pull information based upon transport of the materials. So maybe 10 data points around DOT, including the vendor name and manufacturer.
Okay, great. So Tom, I'm going to switch it over to Mr. Paul Hollingsdale now. Oh, you got one more slide. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks, Paul.
So I got ahead of myself.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, folks, we talked about a lot of value, and this slide just basically sums it up, what our value proposition is to our customers, or quite frankly, what differentiates us from our competitors. We have the largest SDS database available on the market right now with over 23 million vendor documents. We have the largest chemical regulation library with over 4,400 databases from over 100 countries. We also have the largest DHS classification, as Paul mentioned, with over 250,000 substances. Our chemical data is in 100 country formats and in 47 languages. The languages are specific to the country. That is, for instance, in the U.S., the reporting, the documentation is available in both English and Spanish. It's a cloud-based solution, so minimal IT required. This is a one-stop solution where you can add or create a unique set of applications based upon your needs. Our update service, or what we like to call our vendor SDS data management service, this is free of charge. We take over the vendor SDS data management stream for our customers and report to them the changes and results. We have over 4,400 regulatory databases monitored by 18 to 20 in-house experts. We have the tools to allow you to author and create customized labels in 100 countries and 47 languages. We also provide third-party services, approximately 5,000 SDSs a month we author for other customers. It's a one-stop tox and ecotox hazard filtering. We can filter by volatile components, chemicals of concern, carcinogens, embryotoxins. You can create customized reports in these 100 country formats, 47 languages, including one-page mini SDSs, risk and hazard assessments, and hazard environmental reports where you can choose from over 450 data points. We also provide customers dashboards or widgets where you can visualize your data for auditing, inventory, understand, for instance, the life of your SDSs, how many of those are approaching the 3-year limit. And many thanks to everybody. If you have any questions, certainly use the chat box. And now I'd like to introduce Paul Hollingsdale, our technical specialist, who will conduct a product demo starting from literally managing SDSs all the way through creating approvals process and risk assessments against the materials. Thank you.
And I can see your screen perfectly.
That is great. I was just going to ask and make sure that that was all good on the viewer's end. But we'll kick off here. As Tom mentioned, we're not going to have time to cover kind of every feature and every detail in the system. But if you do have specific questions or want to contact us afterwards, that's what I suggest. We're going to kind of be kicking off the agenda just with our basic SDS management, searching the system to find materials. We're capable of doing that by a number of different parameters. So each material on the system can be searched by the name, and that includes trade names and preferred names, which can be added via any language. A CAS number of a pure material, or to search for an ingredient in an actual material. We support part numbering, and most of our clients who have their own part numbering systems, we import that data to be able to go in with the system. And for those in the education and lab sector, we're also able to search by molecular structure. Hopefully, as Tom and Paul made it clear, you basically have both your own database in the system as well as access to our full database, and you can see the option to search either. searching their own to produce reports for examples, to produce lists of materials, or searching the full database to do research, to look at SDSs, to introduce new materials in the system. I was just loading up a document there, and I'll leave it in the screen because obviously we found an exact match there. The database is compiled of a number of nodes. We have both clients who have global systems covering hundreds of sites, hundreds of different locations. But we do have clients who maybe have one site, education campuses, for example, with many buildings, many locations. And there's no limit to the amount of levels, nodes, areas you can have. Each one having its own access privileges and permissions, meaning that local users can be restricted to only see their specific areas of the system and not be confused by a vast system with a number of different folders that they're not interested in. If I click on my main site here, I'm going to get a list of everything in each node underneath. So managers, users can report at each different level, building level, country level, again depending on the organization. Materials can be tracked very simply through the system by hitting the track button. And you can see I clicked on the main site. I've got that material in my small scale lab, but you can also see it's opened up my Denmark country over here and showed me that the material is located in these different folders. We have the option for pure materials as well to track it by ingredient. So to listing chemicals via the specific ingredient and see their locations. So as I said, you can either get very complex or very simple. And we try and make it as simple for the end user as possible. So you can see everything is color-coded. It's very visual. So information can be grabbed even without the user having to open up the SDS document itself. So you can see we have color-coded hazard symbols, which when selected will bring up the key classification information. I will just mention now, obviously each region, each country is assigned to that specific country, meaning things like local GHS variants, local data, and we'll explore it in a bit more detail, will be taken via that country. So all the classifications you're seeing here are US GHS classifications. You won't see any EUH codes, for example, AUH codes, unless I start clicking on other countries. So you can see key information, pictograms, we can get at very easily in the system, as well as Chemwatch's own hazard ratings, again, to make things very simple for the end user. Tags, we're going to go into detail, but you can see I've flagged a number of products. Again, for the end user, they can just hover over them and see exactly what they are. Dangerous goods group, weights, and various other parameters. So next to each material, we have a number of documents stored. As Tom mentioned, obviously MSDS management is the real bread and butter. That's what we kind of started out doing and expanded on that. So here I can access the vendor MSDS. In this case, it's a US SDS because I'm in US. I'm filtering for the United States. And I'm looking at the latest document only. Again, I can break that down, look at older documents, for example. I can remove the filters even further and see if we've got any here for, there you go, we got a UK document as well, and we can open that up as well. So for, again, systems where you have a large amount of documents, everything's filtered down to make sure that the user can very easily get at the document they need, but they're not restricted to, unless you restrict them to the materials that are on the system. So you have your vendor MSDS management. Chemwatch extracts the data, and that powers a lot of documents in the system. So for that product, for example, we can click on the mini MSDS, and we can load all that data into a one-page format. Again, it may look very plain, it may look very simple here. So if I click on a more dangerous material here, I can see with my red hazard symbol, you're going to see a nice color-coded bright red document with the ingredients pulled, with the exposure limits. You can see, again, we've got a lot more health effects here covered by pictograms for the end user. A lot of the technical data like H-code classification is removed, and the data is loaded up in a format that is very simple for the end user. Again, this can be pushed into another language or language selected by the folder or the user that's logging in. So again, you can have a very simple document, or you can have a full review document, which is our gold SDS. We have gold SDSs for all pure materials, and that's how the materials are linked through the system. So when the data is extracted, the ingredients are extracted for each MSDS. They're linked by the ingredient to our databases of regulations, exposure limits, and obviously the gold SDS of the pure material. Gold SDSs are also used for imports. For example, say you saw that SDS had a US and English version, but say we wanted a Canadian version of that document. We can load that up. We got a couple of different language options there. And this is going to give us a document with Canadian exposure limits, Canadian regulations, and any local variation like SARA for the US information, WKD for Germany, Japan, any difference that is legally compliant for the different region. And Chemwatch has, as I said, a team of regulatory specialists who maintain these templates on a live basis. So you can see when I'm asking for this document, it's doing a live pull. So it goes into the system, asks for the most current template that, again, can be edited. Template can really look in terms of visual appearance as you like. It will ask for the correct sections of the SDS. So you can see we've got some Canadian-specific information here. The rule set of terms of the classification. If I scroll down to exposure limits, you can see, again, we didn't have these on the original document. These were pulled live from our database. Going down to regulatory, again, you can see all the different regulations for the different ingredients. And the document is also populated with potentially more information. So we have exact guides for what gloves are suitable, respirators are suitable, toxicity information, again, pulled from our database independently. So we can create, again, effectively whatever SDS we like in the system there. As I said, you can see it's quite a long, detailed document. So we can push that data into various different formats and restrict them to different user levels. So say here, if we didn't want to show them the gold SDS, but we did want to show them a detailed first aid document, we can pull up a detailed first aid document that comes from that gold SDS, again, available in many different languages. So I can go to Dutch, for example. So you can see the emergency reports are really following the sections of the SDS. So environmental section, for example, we can load it up. And again, there's not any environmental hazards for this one apart from marine pollutant. We've not got any data. I'll look at the tox report there. So you can see that's a lot more detailed in terms of what it's telling us. And then your basic first aid, firefighting. But you can see how easy it is to transition between the documents or go back to your list of chemicals and click the button and click the material that you want to load the data into. So the idea is to not bombard the end user with all the documents, but to assign them certain documents that they will know where to get the key information if it's not presented on the UI itself. So as I said, we've got our documentation there. We'll come back to labels in a different section, but they work the same way. What we wanted to move on to here is to look at it from a higher level user, like a manager or someone who needs to report on chemicals or review the inventory. You can see we can record the amounts of chemicals in a number of different ways. We either just have a general recording of, again, 3 different limits here, so current, maximum, and licensed. But we also do have the ability, which is mainly used for educational clients, large campuses and research campuses. We do have the ability to store and track individual containers, link up with purchasing system, track movement of chemicals, and have the manifest populate that. So there's basically 2 different types of users that we have. One who just want to record, manage SDSs, maybe assign weights for reporting purposes, and then those who actually need to manage, move containers, track the movement, record via barcode. So you can see for this location, I'll see if I've been moving anything out. There we go. So you can see the exact movement of chemicals, where they're going, link it up with a purchasing system, print out barcodes, etc. We don't have too much time to obviously do a full demonstration of the scanning software, mainly because it's quite hard to do online because you need a scanner. But as I said, we do have that capability to have containers populate the inventory on manifest of the kind of health and safety reporting side. But I'll flick back to my standard system here, and I'll go back to my US location. We'll click on the top folder here now, so we'll get a list of everything underneath that. So managers may want to review the different sites, look at the different areas to ensure that a couple of different materials are captured. So you can see we have a number of different filters here, so you can filter on specific carcinogens, mutagens, run dangerous goods reports, for example. A number of different factors there. Just going to load into a slightly different user again here. As I said, user control is fairly advanced. Different roles can be set. There's not just a user administrator, etc. You can have a full range of roles, etc. on the system here. So what I wanted to show you is our reporting capability here. Now, as I mentioned, and as Tom mentioned about the software, is the data is provided, and we do have a vast amount of data that comes with the system. When we get a material in, if it's a product, we extract around 70 data points from that material to be able to link it up with our own data. So things like ingredients, physical properties, manufacturing details, everything that we need on our end to update the SDS, link it in with the regulations, and any details that will be assigned to the product itself. As I said, like physical properties of the product, uses, etc. We can extract all of that, as well as around 500 data points that are generated by the system, linked through our databases or via calculation. So I'm just going to grab a couple of these materials, and I want to get a range of products and mixtures. And what I can do, obviously you've got your simple options like just bulk saving documents, archiving documents, etc. But what's really special is if I go ahead and load up our report generator, go to advanced here, I'm going to select a report that I've already created, but I'm going to show you the report in the actual builder. So the normal user obviously wouldn't be accessing the builder itself, they'd just be loading the report. But here you can see searchable list of all the database items in the system. Hopefully you'll notice here that I'm pulling some of them for the actual material itself, and I'm pulling some of them via the ingredients. So for example, physical properties would generally be pulled just on the material itself, but we got things like here, CAS number, percentages of ingredients, regulations of ingredients. We got the classification of the material and of the ingredients here. So I'll add a item here. We'll add a system item. So we'll add the location. We'll update the report, and then we'll run that report again into Excel in this case. But you do have other options, as well as pulling all this data through an API to populate another system. So this is just a large-scale data flat file rip. There's a lot of information here. So you can see I've pulled the material name, classification. I've also pulled the ingredients, classification per ingredient, and any regulation that applies to the UK for those particular ingredients. So if I just hit my filter and show you what can be done, for example, I can see here I've got one item that has potassium chromate that's on a specific regulatory list here. Now you don't have to pull it off into Excel to manage that data. We're going to show you a bit later how you can do it through the system. But this is just an example of, as I said, pulling off, archiving some of the data to have a look at it. So as I said, it's a fairly powerful tool designed to meet a number of requirements there. But as I mentioned, you do have your simple filters here, as well as some of these that will actually run a rule set. So for example, I can launch an incompatibility report here. That's something Chemwatch has worked on to be able to pick up in our different folder breakdown materials that shouldn't be stored together. Some of them we just need to check. Some of them will actually give a specific segregation distance. So I don't have time to kind of go through all the features here. But again, you have lists of concerns, so common regulatory lists, health surveillance data, biological surveillance data. For Europe, we have a system that will query REACH uses in terms of picking out uses that conflict with manufacturing instructions, and also any tag that I've created on the system there. So that's just a kind of a brief look at some of the filters. The other thing that I should mention before we hop into the approval system is, as well as having a view for containers, manifest view, we also have an ingredients view. And this powers a lot of the more advanced reporting tools like the SARA, COMA, the large-scale reporting. What we can do is we can ask the system to take all our materials in our site, break them down, and add them back up again, and tell us what products they're coming from in the system. So you can see here that's coming from one product. I'll try and find something that is located in multiple products. Hopefully I've put, I think the lead was the, no, there we go. But again, hopefully you get the idea. We can add them back up again, break them down, as I said, push that into various reports and rule sets that the system manages. So we're going to go on to approvals here. Approvals is an optional layer in the system. Some clients will manage the system. I'm just going to look up a product here. They'll manage the system using administrators who will either submit SDSs through the form in the system or pull them into their database. So for example, I can just do a simple pull of those products and just store them in my development room there, copy them in, and they'll be stored there. But for clients that have approvals, generally that is restricted, and they ask their users, administrators, to go through a number of steps to be able to store something in there. So we'll take, let's take this product here. and we'll imagine that we couldn't do that process, and we'll send it off to approvals. The way that I've set this demo up is I'm going to be every single stakeholder. I'm going to be the guy on the ground floor, the manager, the regulatory expert, the risk assessor. I'm going to be everyone. So the system's going to kick me through and not kick me out. But in reality, obviously, there'd be different people performing these different steps. So we're going to ask for approval. And again, I've got access to see everything. But we're going to ask for approval in the test lab for 5 liters, let's say. Production site, we're going to ask for 10 tons. Again, this could be 2 different approval steps, but we're going to do it in one, just to show you that you can kind of do it in any number of sites. We've got a form here that I've actually built in the back end of the system, and I'll show you where this sits. But this is completely customizable. Forms can be created next to locations, materials, risk assessments, and they generate data points that can be searched, pulled into labels, pulled into the report generator. They can be required fields, drop-downs, file uploads. They can be anything that we really want. But the way that the approvals work is as long as I've performed my 2 actions assigned to me, which was this form and the location, I can submit that with a comment or without a comment to my next person in the chain. To reject or return an approval, you have to add a comment, but just to pass it on, I don't need to. So as I said, this has passed it on to myself. So you saw it took a bit of time there to work out that I was able to do the step. As well as it does a number of rules to actually work out what steps to go. So we can actually divide the workflow with tags. So in this case, this material only comes to this step if it has these, one of these tags applied. So what we're saying is we're only going to do a risk assessment if we have one of these tags applied. Otherwise, it would skip this step and go on to the next stage of the approval. We can also do parallel approvals, and we can divide the workflow by location, i.e. assigning a manager to different locations and having the approval go to them based on that. And then you've got your basic manual select or just going off to a specific group or role. We'll take this opportunity to show off our risk assessment system. It's based on control banding. So we assign a hazard value to the material using UN's control banding coming from the health hazard codes. So we've got a 4 in this case. That would be due to your H60, 360 there. We go from 0 to 4+. On the right-hand side, we have a risk rating that is going to tell us how hello, can you hear me again?
You're back.
You're back, Paul.
Okay, sorry, I got kicked off the line there. Sorry about that, everyone. I was just saying that you have a hazard rating and a risk rating. That's going to determine how we use the chemical. So in my production, I'm going to say that we're using this for, let's say, production site, so maybe it's part of a process. So let's say transferring liquid by pump. In our research lab, maybe it's just a general workplace task. But you can add your own tasks here, and we've got industry-specific ones, like surface coating, for example. We've got robot spray booth, and then there are just laboratory tasks. We then tell the system the temperature, which will define volatility for a liquid, and what state it's going to be in. The scale of use, so if I say tons for my, oh, no, we had it in kilograms. No, we did have it in tons for my production site, and then say grams for my lab. You can already see a difference between my risk rating. So this might be weekly, this might be daily, that's going to be all day, and this is only going to be for 30 to 60 minutes, for example. So it's the same chemical, a different use scenario. So it's going to recommend us different controls. So for our laboratory research use, we don't require any additional controls. But say we were using it in a fume head anyway, we could put that in. For production, we've got transferring liquid by pump. It's recommended us containment, that's what we have. And you can recommend training, health surveillance, review and select the PPE. And ultimately, this loads it up into a separate database, accessible by the user. And I'm going to go ahead and save these. You can see it's archiving them as well. These are intrinsically linked to the SDS here. So any changes, the data flows through, we'll mark it as out of date, for example. But ultimately, this data can be loaded up into another one-page report, similar to the mini MSDS, but this is made to be task-specific. Sits in a different database where you can do multiple risk assessments on the same material in the same location for different scenarios, and not grouped all under the same SDS there. Again, it's a different database item, so notes, attachments, forms can be saved next to the use rather than the chemical. So you can see once I completed those, it archived them. We got it complete now. As I said, we can kick it to review required when the SDS gets updated, or if I hit my date there. But now, again, I've got my submit button. I can kick it through the approvals. But just to be clear, obviously the risk assessment doesn't have to be part of the approvals. It's just how I've built this one for the demo, so I can show you everything as part of the same approvals process. So this is reviewing the mini MSDS stage, but it could be a stage where we just review the environmental information, for example, and then fill in another form. So this isn't marine pollutants, so we're okay. But you can see at this stage I can return it, I can reject it, or I can approve it. I'm just going to make a note of the name here, just so I can show you that it's been copied into the database once I've finished. And any information I've added while doing the approval, so the risk assessment forms, again, will be transferred into the database. Here we've got a storage step, so I've got my amounts in the different locations, and it's running a incompatibility report for both locations. As I said, my locations aren't set up that well, so you can see there's a lot of already existing incompatibilities, but nothing that I can see that actually includes that chemical that we're trying to add. So I can, again, push it through my approvals. And the whole process is obviously tracked in the system. Emails get sent out at each stage with a link to come straight in. So if you are kicked out and the manager takes over, they don't have to come into this screen and pick it up. So my approved one, the one that we just did there, is sitting there. So you can see where it was approved for. We can see the whole process. So if any notes are applied, what tags are applied. So you can see that that regulatory risk assessment stage was forced because of those tags that were applied there. And who is doing the risk assessment, and obviously in this case it's all me. But obviously there's a list of rejects, cancels, and the user has their own list of requests in the system. The approval can be started from searching the database. It can be started through submitting an SDS, or it can be started using the scanning system by just moving a material. But I'm going to just go into my risk assessment database for a second and show you one of the sites where I asked for approval. I think I just called it my search for lab here. Pull up everything that has a lab in it, which is quite a lot of things, but I think it was my test lab that we asked for approval in. Might be my small scale lab where we can load that up. But there you go, there's my material that we just approved, complete with the risk assessment. And again, if you don't have approvals, you can just do the risk assessment in the location. As I said, different clients have it set up in different ways. But just as I was explaining, this comes out of the box customizable. So there's no requirement for Chemwatch to do any programming. There's a full builder that tells you the stages that are going to be actioned, the different routes from the stages, and the different actions that are part of the stage. So there we got the stage, we got the different stakeholders for the stage. In this case, it's group 1 that I am a part of. And then where after this stage it's going to transition, if it's a single transition or a parallel. In this case, it will go to the lab stage if it's got a laboratory chemical tag, which we didn't have, so you didn't even see this stage at all. So you only saw a certain number of these stages, because as I said, the approval will flow through there depending on the parameters. I'll just quickly show you the request form, which was this one. So again, this sits in the system, so if I find as an administrator I want to add another line item here. We've got an A, I'll just add none, which doesn't really mean anything, and I can update that. Or if I wanted to add another field here, so I can add another checkbox. And build this form really however I wanted. So yeah, we've got a checkbox on and off. So again, these all just sit in the back end of the system to be able to fill in data, to be able to create data points next to approvals, materials, folders, or risk assessments. While we're here, we'll also notice that our tags are managed from the administrator menu. And we're going to dive into how to set one up. And we're kind of going to go backwards here because I can just add a tag, make it manual or automatic, and then select a query, which we're going to explain in a minute. Write the tag name in there, write the description, and that's going to assign that tag running a constant search to anything that meets that. Our query builder is again quite advanced, and that powers the tags. So a query is a search on the system, but that automated tag will constantly run that query and apply the data point, the tag, to that material. So you can see all our search terms are included there, as well as some of the more complicated values like sunset dates for the EU, chemical families. So if I wanted to tag anything with lead in, we're just going to search for, I'll try something else here. It's going to search our database, hopefully in due time. We also have regulatory lists, which is the main feature here. You can see you can add various and, or, contains, in, not in, various different parameters here. But regulatory list is the main kind of feature here. Again, you can filter it by country, but I'm just going to show you the vast amount of data that we can assign to a query and assign to a tag. So hazardous materials, let's just get drug enforcement, for example. So if I look at the list unfiltered, you can see a vast amount of lists coming from around the globe, state regulations, US, you've got countries like Brazil, Hungary. There's over 4,000 regulatory lists here. So drug enforcement, we see REACH regulations, poisonous hazardous substances here. I'll try and pick up a banned list here to show you an example from country here. So let's say United Arab Emirates ban pesticides, for example. If I tick that there, and then we will, let's say we're going to put in a custom form, select, it's called a plant form, drop down, ABC. So if you just imagine that that's a form that tells the user that it's a pesticide, what we could do, we could create a query for any product that we're labeling as a pesticide and it's banned in the UAE, and we could just say, we'll just call this banned UAE, share that and assign that to a tag. So as I said, you can get very, very complicated. You can make specific rule sets, but most people use it to highlight different regulatory lists. I'll go into here and I'll do a filter this time. So if I grab the United States, for example, apply that, we're only going to be looking at regulations that apply to the US, so either global regulations that the US is subscribed to or specific state regulations. So you can see our lists are a lot smaller because we're filtering out some of the other ones. So you can see you've got regulations, different exposure limits, a list of carcinogens, for example, various different lists here. As I said, we have about 4,000, and we're constantly adding new ones on requests. Quite a lot of common ones are different substitution lists, so around the globe, different recommendations for substitution, etc. We have a lot of clients who will divide the workflow based on that. But as I said, you can get very complex, but to the end user, once it's assigned to a tag, they're going to see a very simple tag in terms of what you want them to see with a description. So I'm going to go back to my main database and we'll go back to our US folder that we're fairly familiar with. And you'll see all the different tags that we were looking at earlier. You can see I can get rid of some of the columns here, make the UI a bit simpler. But what I wanted to move on to here was the labeling aspect. So as I said, you can throw any of the data into a label, either with a barcode or without a barcode. You can see we have a number of predefined labels, but you can also build your own label. You can see here I've got a template here, but if I think these borders are a bit too blocky, it looks a bit weird, I've not lined it up properly, what I can do is I can actually go into my builder itself and start to play about and adjust that label. And every time I save it, obviously it throws it back into the full database, and I can manage exactly what the user can see. So I can copy that, for example, I can delete points, I can have that there, shrink it a bit, assign it to a different language, for example. So if you wanted a English-French label, for example, we can have that there. We can pull graphics down into it. So if I wanted my NFPA diamond, I can go ahead and really build the label however I want. As I said, you can drag data points down that are custom from forms. Any value that the report generator can pull, the label can also pull. So I can save that. I can also test the label inside the actual builder itself. But as I said, we're running a bit out of time here. So while I'm doing this, I think the best thing to do is to start going over the questions. What do you think, Tom Paul?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a couple questions here. Can you easily send documents that you produce to other people, like other coworkers?
Yeah. So hopefully when you saw the system, you saw my three little buttons at the top. So every time that I look at either a list or a document, we got our three kind of helpful buttons up there: print, send, save. So send will generate a form to email whatever you're looking at, or a list of things to a coworker. So very easily, PDF will rip whatever you're looking at off as a PDF unless it's otherwise specified. So if I just wanted to email that Minium SDS, I can just go ahead and tick box it. Obviously, if I'm looking at it, you don't need to go through that process. It will generate it again, obviously building it up, and then give me a form here once it's finished with that, just to pop in an email. So very easy to do. We also do have a system to actually link documents. I don't think my system has it here. But for companies that are selling SDSs, selling products, we can create hyperlinks into the documents. And that's how we do interface with other ERPs. So we can pull off links to every document through an ERP and generate them that way.
Great. I had another question. Do we actually look at the sub-ingredients if there's a chemical of concern? In other words, do we go, I guess what they're asking is, do we go one step, or two steps inside of what ingredients comprise something?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it right. Everything is intrinsically linked through the ingredients. So it's how the products are registered. Some products, obviously the product data is assigned to the product, but as part of that we pull off the ingredient and assign the ingredients. A kind of helpful way to look at that is if I actually, just for visual purposes, if I pull up a gold SDS here, you'll actually see as I scroll down to the ingredient section, we'll actually get hyperlinks to a pure gold SDS of the ingredient. But obviously that is how the database is arranged itself. None of these have CAS numbers, so I won't be able to do it with that product. But hopefully you get the idea. I'll try and pull up one here. But yeah, the system wouldn't work unless it was registered that way. And hopefully the features that I've shown you, a lot of them were relying on ingredient data rather than actual data that's been pulled off via the product itself. So you can see here, there's the hyperlinks. And this one's it's got two ingredients. And I can hyperlink there to a pure SDS.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. The last question I had is, this guy says they have a location in Mexico and they were wondering if they could make the user interface in Spanish.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I'm logged in as English, but I can just switch to Spanish. But we can predefine this when the user's logging in. As I said, there are basically three language fields on the system. One for the buttons, which is defined by user. One by the data itself, which is defined by the location. And one for the actual language of the document, which is defined by a drop-down. So Mexico, we'll see if I've actually assigned these properly in the settings. But we're in a Spanish interface, so you can see all the buttons change. I don't actually think I have any chemicals in here. I'll check the group folder. All the buttons will change, preferred names will change. If I've got it assigned correctly, documents will, there we go. They'll load up in the correct language. They'll pull any exposure limits, obviously none for water. They'll pull any exposure limits there. But we could create a US document in Spanish. So the data and the language are separate, but they can all be set up to suit the actual user. I think I've got a hyperlink here to a German user that just logs in German and has access to my German folder. So as I said, we don't expect everyone to log in as English. They can log in as their individual language and get access to their section of the database itself.
Wow, that's impressive.
I have a question here, Paul, for you.
Yeah.
Is there a cost to upload? The question is there a cost to upload SDS not in the master database? And I can answer that one. It's $10 a document if we don't have it. Another question is, will the system auto-update from WMIS to GHS requirements? Absolutely. If you click on the Canadian format of the SDS, it automatically converts to the WMIS format. In fact, we just updated the module about 5 months ago to include WMIS 2015. And there is no cost associated.
I'll just show you in the back end as Spanish. All the kind of regulatory formats are, obviously they're monitored to us by a certain extent, but say for countries that are in transition periods, if I go Canada here, I can look at exactly what Canada, the Canadian document is going to look like. So it's GHS. But if I wanted to remove that WMIS classification detail completely, I could just set this up and then save that. I'll switch back to English in a second here. But this also means that some of the optional Chemwatch things like the Chemwatch hazard rating, various sections can be turned off and on. Documents, the gold SDS can be shortened or lengthened depending on the sentence count. You saw we had various different formats, different sections that can be turned off and on depending on the requirements. Obviously logos, vendor details, various bits of information can be edited in the settings.
Okay, great. I see we have a couple more questions, and I guess we'll wrap it up. We're running a few minutes over. I appreciate everyone's patience. I have a question that says, we have the ability, do you have the ability, if the system is down, for you to have a physical copies of your SDS or a backup? Can you just speak about what happens if internet connectivity were to go away?
Yeah, I mean, you see the print option. Obviously, if you wanted to hard copy them, you saw when I was looking at, I'll just let that load out. When I was looking at a list of chemicals, we had the option to print off, and we also had an offline archive option. I wanted to see in my desktop if I have actually one there, but I don't. We do have the option of creating an offline archive, so probably stop tabbing in and out of this one. We do have the option of creating an offline archive of the system, a fully indexed archive. So it takes a bit longer than actually saving the document, but it is just 2 clicks to basically rip everything off and rip a file that will search for the materials. And you can do that with the SDS, the Minium SDS, and the Gold SDS. I'll see how good my connection is here with the webinar software open. Otherwise, if you've got any more questions, go ahead.
I was going to say, while you're doing that, we do have the last question, which you don't need to demonstrate, but it's saying, can we upload a chemical inventory using Excel into the system?
Yeah, I mean, we have a project team whose job is to help transfer either from manual or current systems. Normally, all we'll ask for is an Excel that contains the name, manufacturer, where it needs to be placed. We can add preferred names, part numbers along with that. But generally, we set up the system for you. So all the locations, all the materials get set up, registered when you first start the license. So yeah, the majority of our clients will just give us a Excel document. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. I see you're still working on one last thing, so I'll let you finish that.
I just have to extract that here.
Yeah, I'll let you finish that. And it's a really nice feature. Sometimes, just printing them out in a book is so easy. We keep them current for you. You just click on it, bam. You send it out to a big PDF, send that to your printer, put the book out there. If you need to refresh your book every few months, it literally takes 3 minutes. But this is our offline archive. I think this is very impressive. How we're able to.
Just for time's sake, I did it with the smallest document. and I've only done one, but obviously it's fully searchable. Just give you a list of everything that you've ripped off, and then you just click that and it will just link you into the actual folder that contains the documents. And again, you can create a hyperlink to that index, obviously. So yeah, offline archive is very easy to create, as well as just hard copying everything from the system, which is another way to do it.
Yeah, it's really simple. So anyway, well, I think the last thing we like to do, we're done with our question and answers, is we want to just have a quick poll question for everybody. And if we're kind of toward the end of the event, we ran over a few minutes, and we appreciate your staying with us. We just had a lot to talk about, and we knew it was going to be fast and furious. But if you don't mind, just if you could give us some feedback so we can know where to go in future presentations, and if you don't mind, just drop Tom or I an email so that we know kind of what you're interested in and that kind of thing. That would be really helpful for us, because as we do these webinars moving forward, we can keep the content relative to what people are looking for. So anyway, Tom, you think of anything else?
No, I think it was well covered.
Yeah.
Paul, I do appreciate your demo capabilities. And thank you, audience, for attending. We did run over. I hope you found it of value.
Yeah, and you will get an email from us with a link to the recording. And like I said, you could watch it, and then you can reply back to that and ask us questions, or if you want to set up a private session, or you want a trial, we can connect you with a trial. Anything, just let Tom and I know. And I really appreciate Mr. Paul Hollingsdale. We had a lot of material for him to cover, and he had the big red S on his chest today, and he went through everything, and very impressive. So anyway, well, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let everybody go. We're going to hang around for a few more minutes. If you have questions, Tom, I, and Paul will be here. So I hope you have a nice afternoon and morning, whatever it is. And thank you very much for attending.